Okay, I'm going a little crazy right now because I got an email this morning and it said I use brightener in Soundtrap to brighten up my vocals. I see dozens of comments about I use brightener to brighten my vocals in Soundtrap, and a bunch of people also just brightening their vocals in Soundtrap with other plugins. That is a very good thing, but it's gonna hurt you in the end, so that's what this video needs to be about. Here's the problem. Almost every single vocal that I've ever had is too dark, so you need to brighten it. By too dark, I mean there's a bunch of frequencies on the low end that need to be cut, and a bunch of the high end needs to be boosted. But here's the issue with that. Don't boost the high end, cut the low end. Before we get into the video, please leave a like down below for the algorithm. Really helps these videos come out. I'm a small channel. I'm making like a video a day with this stuff. Please, I would very much appreciate it. Let's get into the main part. This is like a weird example. This is what you have when you have like a vocal that's too big on the bottom right here, right? I know this is goofy, but trust me, it's a good analogy. That's like too big, that has too much information on the bottom end right here, right? And then there's bad frequencies up top, up here, that are just kind of poking out and aren't right. At first, the first thing that you need to do is to shrink this area so it's normal, and then you could worry about this top part and making the top part good. And that ends up like brightening the track, because it looks like, okay, now the top and the bottom sound good, so the brightness is there. But like, you need to shrink the bottom first, because if you went with your original and then you just tried to make this high part better, if you just try to brighten this up how it is, it'll look like this. Do you know what I'm saying? That like, if you have your vocal, right? This is an analogy for the vocal. I know this is super weird, this like body on this cartoon, but whatever it is. If you have a vocal and it has low frequencies in the bottom, you're not going to like add frequencies to the top without like make like a jaggedy CLA vocal. There's just bad sound. It just sounds bad. I'd much rather cut that bottom end and smooth that out, then worry about the stuff on top. That to me is perfect, okay? So the reason I'm making this whole video by itself, it's because I have a whole vocal video that I went over how to make vocals in Soundtrap, but it's a long video for one, and two, I don't directly address this problem, because I say in that video, which does cover this, start with what's called a shelf move, and then go basically from bottom to top with your EQ. So when you have a shelf move, there's so many reasons why shelving the bottom end is a good idea. I do it with almost every single vocal that I have, especially with the microphones that I'm using right now. Is you're cutting out that low end first, and when you start with that low shelf, you're forcing yourself to do that first, and then you're focusing on the big ones. So how it looks in Soundtrap is you go in, your EQ ends up looking like this. It ends up looking like dips in the bottom, and then the whole thing kind of has this natural downward curve, right? And I go into every single band and I just start right here, and then I boost and lower just a little bit, then I boost and lower every single one to make sure I like where it is. But I always end up cutting that bottom end first before I do the top end, and then the top end is left alone. Just like in these examples, the top end is how it is, because that doesn't actually need to change. Cutting is always better than boosting, and here's Alex Toomey, who I love and I've been putting in like all my videos, saying focus on subtractive EQ, which is taking away things in the EQ before additive EQ.
If you want industry level mixes, you should focus on subtractive EQing, compression limiting first. Do not focus on effects. Do not focus on whether or not you should mix in mono or stereo. Do not focus on trying to do too much, right? Focus on, you should try to get the result you want with the fewest plugins possible, right?
So here's what this sounds like. I studied this vocal. I tried to make this vocal so much better than it was, and it gave me such a headache. Like, I'm not following my own rules. Like, I did this in Ableton. I was mixing it for a friend of mine. It worked out fine in the end, but I wasted so much time because I went initially with doing the high end first before the low end. So I'm doing my best to emulate the chain that I had first. I basically got the raw, which sounds like this.
Ask me why I'm quiet, what more can I really say?
And then I got one whole chain on the bottom. I did this for like an hour maybe, which is way too long for me to be working on a vocal, especially in Ableton. I did all of this stuff to it. It was so long. I was like, I was really big braining with all my ear to try to make it better. And I was basically trying to do this, which was stupid of me. So here's what that sounded like.
And I praise Almighty, pray to God Almighty. I'm ripping Rick.
It sounds stupid, right? It just doesn't sound good. It sounds overproduced. And then what I did, I cut everything off of this vocal. I said, no more of any of this. I'm going straight how I had, what I had before. I'm not doing any more. Restarting, regrouped, and then I put the low end off first for this next one. So I went in with the new chain. I started out doing a low shelf on, it happened to be this API EQ, 400 and down, cutting that shelf, and then here's what it sounded like.
Thoughts floating through my mind that I gotta take to the grave. Don't ask me why I'm quiet, what more can I really say? Mind in a haze, I take the time and I praise.
Did my whole chain from there. That's basically what we used for the final. We added some effects to it and everything so it fit in the track well, but that's basically what I did with it. Going back to this body analogy, there is this part that's poking out in the top, and that is also something that's super common that I kind of try to build into this picture. I know it's so stupid, but whatever it is, I tried to build this idea in, is that there is one common spot in the high end, and I can point to one specific band on the Soundtrap EQ that is always a problem with the high end or the high mid end, and it's the 2100 range, or this kind of range of frequencies, and it's this band on the Soundtrap EQ. I always end up cutting this a little bit. I don't know what it is. I've seen this in so many places too. There was this video about Stuart White, who's this cool producer who mixes psychedelic rock music. I saw him mix psychedelic rock music once.
There's spiky peaks and stuff like that. In this case, it was around that same area as I notched out earlier, 2650. It was getting out of control, so like, you know, zap it with the C1.
And he totally took this trick. He goes, this is the multi-band on 2.1K. He was basically ducking out 2.1K, and he was like, okay, this is something I learned from Dave Pensado. It works with almost every vocal that I have. I knew that Dave Pensado reference because he talked about it so long ago, cutting this 2.1K part, and it was like game changing. I had this 2.1K cut. For some reason, it always ends up that small little area needs to be cut.
Be careful with 2K. Now that frequency is the frequency that I use the C1SC on a lot to control.
I don't want to give big generalizations because I hate doing that. The biggest fallacy in mixing is thinking one tip works for everything. So I hate to like say always cut 2.1K out, but it just like is undeniable how much I have to cut it out. Sometimes I want to not do it, and then after I cut it, I'm like, yeah, that was the spot I was willing to cut. I'm ashamed to say that, but I always find a way to mess with that area specifically, and it's always kind of cutting it sometimes. So like I said, do me a favor and do you a favor for yourself really, and don't like take general tips. Don't be like, okay, I'm gonna cut 2.1K out of everything that I do. But yeah, a lot of the time, very heavily consider every vocal that you have. If it's not apparent instantly, cutting out this band on the Soundtrap EQ, if you're in there, or cutting out 2100, 2500, around there, with the EQ, if you're having just a dry vocal. So to recap, it is definitely use the bottom end first. Cut the bottom end first, and then once you do that, consider 2.1K, consider that area, and then once you have that, maybe you'll have a clean vocal on your hands. After you have a clean vocal on your hands, go into your compressors now. Don't go into your compressors first. After you have this clean, tight, EQ'd vocal, then you can compress the thing. I don't care. This is basically almost every single vocal, not just rap vocals, not just singing. Every vocal that you could possibly have in Soundtrap is probably going to act like this. An EQ section that you want to have, and then you go into it. I, again, really like Alex Toomey. I've been watching him recently. Like I said, I'm putting him in all my videos. Here's him talking about, okay, I just worked with one compressor and one EQ for a long time and then made that sound good.
So back in the day, I used to use one EQ, one compressor, and one de-esser on every vocal until it worked. And then when I got to a point that I was really good at using just those three, just a Q10 SSL channel and the regular Pro Tools de-esser, literally just those three on vocals. Once I got vocals to sound good with those, then I started to be like,
okay, what if I added the SSL EQ after that? oh, what if I added a second compressor? So
Now I have, the the SSL channel into the Fairchild compressor, into a de-esser, into a SSL compressor, into then another EQ. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more, that little extra 2-3%, you know what I mean? But I'm not doing 50% with one and 50% with the other. I'm doing 99% with one, then doing an extra 1% with the other. And that extra 1% is for me. I don't need it. I'm just picky now.
This is not going to happen overnight. You're not going to watch this YouTube video, know how to mix instantly. Huge part about this is ear training to make sure you could hear what 2.1K is. You could hear how much low end you need to cut, and you need to know like how much you need to do to compare it to other songs and other professional mixes that you like. But mostly following these tips, just being on these tips, just focusing on these things, you'll end up experimenting on top of these little places. And I think it'll be the fastest way to get something very, very clean on your vocals. That's pretty much it. Thanks for watching this very high energy video. I mean, I needed to get this one part out, and I'm just like, okay, I'm pretty sure everyone who I've been talking to is falling victim to this little thing. I just wanted one 10-minute video explaining what this was. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe down below, please. I'm a small channel right now. If you guys got any value from that, that would help me out so much. Thank you guys just for watching though, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.